Hey everybody, Ken Adams here, back at you with another episode of 100% Uptime with Ken and Dave. And I'm joined today, of course, by Dave George, co-founder and CEO of P2P Labs. Good morning, Dave. And hey, who's our special guest today?
Well, Ken, today we're diving into the mind of a cybersecurity CEO, Elena Donea, who's been navigating the ever-changing challenges that threaten and haunt service providers and their customers, and now sees her mission to maybe empower and safeguard these organizations with client-centric, cost-effective, scalable cybersec solutions. Elena, welcome to 100% Uptime.
Welcome.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thank you so much, Ken. Really appreciate you having me on. And geez, that's some introduction. I don't know if I can meet the expectations of what I'm about to get into. So I really hope I do it justice. But really appreciate you having me on.
I think I'll make the first question then a little bit easier for you, which is talking about your origin story, if you will. So, Elena, before we get into cybersecurity, I'd love to know more about you. Tell us a little bit about your roots, perhaps maybe a moment or an experience early in your career that really shaped how you think about client relationships and ultimately cybersecurity today. So let's start there. That's an easy one, I hope.
Yeah, no, I think I can do that. So look, thank you so much. So I suppose when it comes to my roots, I come from quite a different background to what probably traditional security testing providers do. But even before that, maybe I come from a country called Moldova in Eastern Europe. I moved to Ireland when I was about 8 or 9, so I was a young child. Didn't know how to say a sentence in English back then, and I suppose it was true. My parents emigrated from Moldova to Ireland, and one day my mom was like, "We're going here, and you really have no say in it." And I was like, "Cool, I'm excited."
Okay.
So fast forward, when I moved to Ireland again, I had very little English, and went through school here. Moved through the various different ranks in school, through the various different levels. But also when it came to college, I didn't study anything in relation to networking, cybersecurity, or anything like that. Again, went down a non-traditional route into data science, business analytics, probability, maths, engineering, you name it, nothing to do with cybersecurity. And traditionally, graduates would have went down the data analytics and scientific route, whereas
Sure.
I took a slight detour where a job came up in one of the big four here in Ireland and Deloitte, in relation to cyber risk. So it was actually one of the, I'd say, I think we at the time, when you're in fourth year in college, you really want to get as many doors open and as many opportunities open. I think cyber risk was the only one that was in Deloitte, and then everything else was around data science and everything like that. I was going to go down to traditional route, but this was the one that I was accepted for an interview. So long story short, I got the job in Deloitte. Started off my career with them. At the start, I thought I was getting into a programming job. I didn't know what I was in for. Everyone was scaring me that it's a computer science degree or a computer science job. It was nothing like that. I hated. There was one module I think in college around programming, and I absolutely hated it. Didn't want to go down the route, but that's what I got, and that's what I got into. So fast forward. Yep.
Let me ask you a question about that, Elena. So, okay, so you sign up for this. It's kind of what pulled you into the cybersec field initially, but what kept you going at that point? What, you know, was it complex? Was it difficult? Was it just not what you expected? And then what kept you going in the cybersec, field, if you will?
Yeah, great question, Dave. And I suppose when you're a graduate it's an absolute privilege to be in one of the big fours, touting off your career at that benchmark, and to be able to grow at such a fast pace with experiencing various different projects that are being thrown your way and that kind of stuff. But I think what really kept me going is the enthusiasm and motivation to drive people crazy. Because I think I was very much one of those people that we had a cyber lab, if I remember correctly, and I was asking so many stupid questions from everyone. And I went into, so cyber risk is obviously broad, but what I specialized or started specializing in is penetration testing, which is also called ethical hacking. And it's all about how an attacker sees an asset or a system and tries to attack it and identify vulnerabilities and that they could exploit. Right. So I went from a very non-technical background into the most technical area. And I think it's through asking those stupid questions, annoying people. I think they at some point they just gave up and they were like, right, let's start off with a small project for Elena. Let's get her to shadow you. And I think it got to a point where I'd say it's probably a few months into the role, and I was asked to go out on client site with my manager at the time to run. And that's kind of come back to your point, Dave, around was there a moment in time that kind of helped me stick to it, and maybe something that changed as well, which is I think when I moved into come back to I went out on client site. I had very little knowledge at that point as well. Penetration testing typically starts off with a simple scan. It was a vulnerability assessment that we had to do, run a scan against the customer's environment. And I was told that all I'll have to do is click this button, plug in a wire into the firewall, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I was like, that seems great. No problem at all. I can do that. So I went on client site and I will not share who that was, but it definitely was a pivotal moment in my career where I was like, I wasn't fully comfortable with what I was given to do. I went on site anyway because that's what you do. You're being told to do X, and when you're in Deloitte, you can't say no. And I suppose fast forward a couple of days into the project, the customer was like, "You really don't know what you're doing here, do you?" I was like, "Nope." And from then on,
well, it certainly humbled you.
Absolutely. I was that typical example of, I think that was a pivotal point where I was like, right, I really need to understand this better, focus on learning and expanding into the area that I'm going to grow into, and start getting certificates, really go down the path of that, of penetration testing. So from then on, I think, and I use that to reference a lot of the work that we do nowadays with customers and partners, which is we don't want to offer services that, and again, this is not, I'm not trying to say anything about the Big Four or anything like that. I think we've all experienced various different things across our career journeys, but making sure that the service that we do deliver is on par with what we say we do, rather than here's a graduate who goes on site. And I was one of those people that was in that position to go on site, didn't know what I was doing, and we want to make sure that the customer gets the value for money.
So for our audience who's hearing about WhatsExposed, your current company, for the first time, tell us what you do. Tell us what gap or problem or problems WhatsExposed solves, so they have a general sense of what exposed is.
Yeah, absolutely. So WhatsExposed is a security testing organization. So we focus primarily on offensive security, and we work with service providers across Ireland, UK, US, wider Europe, and now LATAM as well, to deliver security testing on the partner's behalf to the end customers. We're a channel first organization, so all of our work is delivered through MSPs, CSPs, anyone who doesn't have security testing as part of their core pillars and wish to avail of a service like this to deliver to their end customers. And I suppose one area that we do best is it's the team that we bring forward that are added as an extension of the partners team, and make sure that we make the partner look good, because as part of our service we also white label our services as well, and can come under the partners umbrella as part of whatever work we deliver, or alternatively as a third party. Really depends on a case by case basis. So we the way we work with our partners and customers is through offering everything from pre-sales, sales support, obviously delivering on the security test when we do win the business from the customer, and make sure that at the end of the day we provide top tier service to the end customer through the model that we've also devised. And at the end of the day, it's here to support the partners, enabling them to offer a new service line, but also customer, to make sure that their attack surface is secure and mitigated.
For some transparency for our audience, we met because P2P is a partner of WhatsExposed here in the US and Canada, really the North American market, but predominantly US and Canada is our core focus. So got to meet the team got to meet your crew at one of the events earlier in February. So, you know, I want our audience to know that if they have any questions on this, they can certainly reach out to you and your team. But of course, here in the States, they can certainly reach out to Ken and his team as well. All right, let me shift a little bit here. So, Elena, C.S. Lewis, I think you probably know that name from his famous Chronicles of Narnia series. He's actually famous for writing about living in the atomic age and how it wasn't such a novel idea. It was just a new, different one. And he argued that, you know, succumbing to fear in the nuclear age really it's almost unnecessary, because fear itself doesn't change the ultimate reality that you're living in the nuclear age, but it does paralyze people. His perspective resonated with me when I was thinking about this interview with you, because of the modern anxieties about and around cyber threats. With cybersecurity often framed around fear, right? Especially with the media, breaches, threats, ransomware, you know, worst case scenarios. How do you personally think about cybersec in a way that's maybe empowering as opposed to just paralyzing?
Interesting question, Dave. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's a lot of scare factors out there, and I think a lot of cybersecurity organizations do use that scare tactic to help organizations secure their infrastructure or be ready when that attack is going to happen. I think for me, it's when it comes to cyber risk. So there's various different, as you mentioned, attacks out there. You call it, whether it's ransomware, third party risk, I think is one of the most prevalent ones at the moment. I think hacktivism or any of the geopolitical issues out there, it's all scare. Be ready, it's coming for you.
Right.
And it's, I think, another quote that is very often used, it's a matter of not if, but when. And making sure that the organizations are ready when the attack happens. But I think for me, it's a lot of it is contextual, or a lot of it is around the IT risk. But I also think it's not just an IT department risk; it's a business resilience risk. It's a business risk as a whole, because you want to make sure that you're resilient when an attack does happen. And unfortunately, it may be as a matter of when, not if. And it's making sure that you have all the processes and the pillars in place to be able to continue your operations when that attack does happen. And I think it always comes down to the unfortunate basics. Like there's the threats out there are always evolving. You have AI now, one of the major buzzwords at the moment. I'm sure we'll come to it as well. But there's the threats are always evolving. It's how do we adapt to to be one step ahead of the attackers out there. And what can we bring back to the basics? How can we shape that into what we do on a daily basis, to make sure that we put those defenses up and we still stay one step ahead. So it is a challenge, I think, from an organization's perspective, and then client, everyone wants to make sure that they're not going to be the headline in the newspaper. But I think if they have if they do a few things right, I think they can delay, let's say, the timeline to when an attack might happen. And yeah, that's where I suppose a lot of the organizations, MSPs, CSPs, ourselves, we can support in shedding a light on where those risks are and putting a risk management process in place to mitigate
it's interesting because at least once a month I get a letter saying our security was breached, your name, number, and potentially social security number has been leaked. However, I don't get that letter until 6 months later. It's like, wait a minute, you had a breach back in February and you're just telling me now? Like, so it's very real, like in our everyday lives, outside of us being in this world, it's happening to, my mortgage company, for instance, or to TransUnion, or some of these larger organizations that store all this personal data about us. It's horrible.
Yeah.
What is something that you think people in general, but I definitely want you to hone in on executives, because sometimes I think, I'm a big proponent of not doing top-down management, but sometimes you need someone sometimes at the top to sort of relay the culture of cybersecurity in an organization. What are some executives fundamentally misunderstanding or getting wrong about their digital exposure? Like, can you talk to that? Like Ken's saying, hey, it took him 6 months to even hear about something that happened. So I would say that's maybe slow in transparency might be one. But what else do you think maybe executives are getting wrong or misunderstanding about their exposure?
Yeah. So I'm going to break it down it's a really good question. I'm going to break it down to two things, because I think as you were talking there, things sprung to mind. So one is particularly around the executives and the just general business direction or where they're going, because one of the main things for a CEO is to make sure that their business has no reputational damage and is continuous. So number one is, regardless whatever initiatives the business owners have, it's making sure that what the strategy or whatever is being shaped in the next quarter or 6 months or 12 months is prioritizing what's important and not what's urgent. And I think that's a comment that I keep using. I've heard it on a podcast recently, or probably before Christmas, and I absolutely loved it, and it stuck with me because it's so prevalent, and it's so it can be used across so many different dimensions. So prioritizing what's important, not what's urgent. And if we go to the second item that I was going to mention, which is if we zone into what's important, is I can break it possibly down into 5 or 6 different things. So when we go back to the basics of what should an organization or a business leader be really focused on, and particularly, I suppose, it all stems from the IT department, let's say, or the security department, because they're the ones that are implementing all these controls, and they filter whatever processes and controls they have, they filter down through the organization. So number one, and a lot of it that we see nowadays in across cyber attacks, is attackers using identities to attack organizations or to impersonate users. Anything, I suppose, they steal your credentials. Perfect example. Your credentials were stolen in a specific data breach. What can an attacker do with them? What assets could they log into on your behalf? So making sure that those identities are prioritized, locked down with MFA, access controls, whatever they are, so that there's constant checks if there's anything that should be, if there's a user that left the organization, have we offboarded them effectively? So number one for me, it's around identity. The other piece is around patching. So that is an absolute, and that I suppose applies to managed service providers as well, as patch. I think I've seen somewhere that someone said patch like your revenue depends on it, and it very much is the right
Yeah.
thing to think about it, because if you don't patch, if someone exploits a vulnerability associated with the software out there, ultimately an attacker might potentially maliciously use it, and it's going to affect your business operations through various different means, and ultimately result in loss of revenue, stalling operations, etc. So patch like you have like it's it affects revenue.
I like that term.
Yeah, there you go.
Gonna have to
There you go.
steal that one.
Yeah. And just on if we were to, I suppose the third option would be around phishing and social engineering and everything like that. It kind of ties into the first one as well. But at the end of the day, to me, if you might have all the latest technologies and tool sets and processes and everything in place at the top of the range, but if they're not configured effectively, they're an attacker is going to find a loophole through a human. So someone is going to get a phishing link and they're going to be busy or focused on another thing or not really pay attention, click on that link and they're in. So ultimately it's making sure that social it's the social awareness, or not social, security awareness is prioritized as well. And there's various
I have,
different tool sets.
I have a follow up to that with the proliferation of AI tools, unmanaged AI tools. What are you seeing as far as security issues with that? I mean, that's the topic right now, right? So
I love that.
everybody, like if it, whether or not the business owner approved using an AI tool in their business or not, their employees are using it.
Yep.
So
Yep. Absolutely. Great question. So, God, where do I even start?
I know, right? It's a huge hole.
Well, so Elena, let me help with that, because I was actually going to ask a similar question, Ken, but I was going to come at from the human qualities of when she's working with a client, whether it's in the US or in other countries, and you're building a security team for them or with them, or it's your team and their IT department. What human qualities do you believe matter just as much as technical skill and agentic AI and other types of things on the AI side? So I'm going to take Ken's question and I'm going to kind of, morph it into mine as well. So let's first talk about his question or concern is, where do you see agentic AI and types of, AI being utilized effectively and then maybe not so effectively? And then on the flip side, what human qualities do you look for that bridge that gap or go beyond the technical capabilities of software or other types of oversight?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
That's great, Dave. So the first one is, as Ken mentioned, everyone uses Gen AI tools. Take your pick, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is. And it's, fortunately or unfortunately, users are using it to speed up their the efficiencies, to make efficiencies as they do during the day. And
Sure.
business owners or leadership teams may or may not have visibility into exactly what they're doing. And Copilot, I'm going to use that as a perfect example, because that's one that we see. I'd say I have a Copilot conversation 5 times a week, no joke, with at a minimum. So when it comes to Copilot, let's say, how do we make sure, how does a business owner make sure that an engineer does not use Copilot to try and extract the CEO's payroll details? How do we prevent that from happening? And I think an area where a lot of service providers are in at the moment is establishing a benchmark of how can Gen AI be used in a safe manner? How can we put guardrails around it? Let's understand what your organization might be using or might need Gen AI tools for, in what areas, what departments, what services, what processes would be useful for it, and then let's put guardrails around it. So starting off with an assessment, in a customer's environment, and then putting in, I call it an AI firewall. Be it there's various different tool sets out there that can be implemented at an organization level. And when someone like an engineer in their department are looking to do something malicious or upload some sensitive data to ChatGPT, they'd be prevented from it through a UI interface or something like that. So we do, I suppose, how can leadership prevent that? I think it's opening your eyes to your users are using it on a daily basis. So you need to act sooner rather than later, act on what's important, not what's urgent, and prevent and put guardrails in place to allow users to use it, but make sure that they're using it in a orderly fashion. And I think a lot of the financial sector, particularly what we're seeing at the moment, a lot of our customers are in the financial space. And I was speaking to a customer the other day, and he was saying that we've blocked Copilot. We're not using it. If you go to copilot.x, we check it out. We blocked it, and they're so proud of it. And I'm like, you don't need to block it. You can if you want, if it's an absolutely not imperative to your organization, if you're not going to use it. But it can speed up and it can help with efficiencies, but you don't need to block it. Let us help you with guiding you on the path of using it safely and effectively. And you have governance at a business level to say you're confident that the user, your team aren't going to use it maliciously. So I hope that answers the first portion of the question.
So what I'm hearing here is don't connect your AI to a data lake and just let everybody do whatever they want. I suspect that would be a very low bar for most MSPs and CSPs to follow. And yes, you definitely answered the first part of the question. The second part, of course, is the human aspect of it, right? The team building aspect. And while you're thinking about an answer, as I'm jibber jabbering here, add in there maybe a moment where your experience with cybersec was more personal than just professional. Like, did something that you do resonate with you and or a client where you did something good, like, and it just felt good from a personal perspective and not just, hey, that's my job, I did it as a professional? Was there any moment at WhatsExposed where you're like, wow, that just felt good for whatever reason?
Yes, and I think it's, so I'll come back to that. I think from a user perspective, and I suppose from maybe from a leadership perspective, what might you need to have in order to be, let's say, open-minded to the use of AI in the organization? And I suppose it's being open-minded to understanding that there are threat actors out there that are using AI for malicious purposes to impersonate users, impersonate you. As a matter of fact, we've had countless emails coming in impersonating myself, pretending to seek for sensitive information or do X, Y, and Z. So I think it's been open-minded that attackers are using AI to be more efficient in what they're doing as well. And then yourselves as or the leadership team is just bringing it back to the basics, and having a proactive approach in terms of, as a team, we understand this is the reality. What are we going to do about it? So yeah, I think, I don't know if I can provide a better answer for that at the moment, but going back to your question around something that felt good. So I think there's always, and I don't want to exaggerate here, but I think it can be a major kind of event or a major thing that might have happened, or it might just be a small text or a small a word or a sentence that a customer or partner might have said that made your day. So for instance, one of them yesterday, would have been, I think we were talking with a partner, and we just realized that I think they didn't realize I was as young as I was. And I think they mentioned the year or whatever. And I was like, they also mentioned that, Elena, that's probably the year you've been born. I was like, I'm so sorry. It actually is. And it stemmed from there to say, by the end of that call, we were talking about security or whatever. And as we were closing, the team were just saying, just before you go, well done. Whatever you're doing, the team at WhatsExposed, your whole approach, the quality, everything that you're doing is absolutely amazing. And I think with little things like little comments like this, they might mean very little to some people, but I think you probably can relate as business owners yourself. I think certain a lot of the times these little comments do help to kind of bring you back on track to say, "Do you know what, maybe you are doing the right thing. Let's keep going, despite the hardships or whatever it might be behind the scenes." So yeah, I don't know if I can point it to a major event, but I think there's small little things like this. I'll give you another one, just as I thought about it from an end client perspective. So another financial organization in Ireland where we worked with recently, they're quite reserved, and obviously they were very proactive in their security defenses and proactiveness in whatever they're doing. And they carried out penetration tests previously, but this year they leveraged our team to carry out their annual pen test. And the feedback we got from the customer was that they were saying that in the last 13 years of him being in the business, he's never seen a report of this quality end to end from an organization. We found items that were not found before. The approach through the technology that we would have offered, or the attack patterns that we've took, he was just absolutely gobsmacked. So that's very humbling, but it's also, I'm not trying to I think it's just the quality of the team. When you get feedback like this from end clients, it really resonates with probably what you're doing daily. So
Elena, so and I have a bullet point here on my screen because I want to make sure I get the data correct here. I was reading a survey, and it says that a cyber attack takes place every 39 seconds. So I quick did the old math, and that's 2,200 cases a day. When you're advising companies, how do you help leaders shift from seeing cybersecurity solely as like a cost center, right? It's just an expense, it's the cost of doing business, to seeing it more as part of their brand, the, trust, integrity. I assume that sometimes that's difficult to translate for them immediately when they see a cost of performing pen tests and other types of cybersecurity functions, putting wrappers around certain things, changing processes. These all have an expense to them, at least initially. How do you connect reputation to value when it comes to cybersec?
Yeah, really great question. I think specifically the division or the pillar that we operate in within cybersecurity around offensive security has an advantage. The reason we have an advantage is because there's a lot of regulatory standards or frameworks out there that demand that organizations perform penetration testing or offensive security on an at least annual basis. And most recently, we obviously play in the US and the European market, but in the European market, I'll draw down on the financial services space. There's an act that was recently passed in relation to DORA, which is around continuous monitoring, continuous testing of your infrastructure, and in relation to third-party suppliers. So when you have frameworks or regulations like this, it helps with sharing the message across to the end customers to say, this is why you might need it. Here's a regulatory framework to say you'll have to do this anyway, unfortunately, because if you want to be compliant with X, Y, and Z, the day will come and you'll have to do it, and then you're having a budget as part of this as well. So I think it's regulatory frameworks definitely help. I think it's also making them aware, even if they're not, even if there's various different industries perhaps that aren't regulatory aligned, or they don't need to comply with certain frameworks. We actually have customers that simply want to be compliant, be secure, and a lot of the times we work with end clients and try to convince them on something that they absolutely need to do, and according to X, Y, and Z. But we often have customers that don't have to do anything, and yet they're the easiest conversation to have because of, again, how open-minded they are, and just looking at whatever threats are out there, that they're just worried that someday an attacker is going to knock on their door and they're going to push it open. And I think if we use some examples, such as the recent striker attack you might have heard in the news in relation to manufacturing, stalling operations in the healthcare space, everything like that. I think it's really, I think what we spoke about at the top of the call, which is threats and the scare factor,
Right.
it does play an effect to help organizations really understand that it is happening out there. You're not the target today, or you may not be, but you might be, and you're not aware of it because your SIEM or your solutions isn't tuned effectively to be able to capture it. I'd say there's a lot of organizations out there that are currently in breach, or I suppose are having attackers in their environment, and they're completely unaware of it. We carry this out on a regular basis through red teaming attacks, and we're quite successful in it. So I think, I don't know.
Ken, would you agree? What I've heard from some of our customers or some of their customers, the end users, the small and medium businesses, is, well, I'm not an enterprise. I'm not in a large organization that has such a large footprint. So hackers will just ignore me because I'm too little to care about. But I saw a survey that said that I think it's 40% of SMBs also get attacked. So this is not something where it's 95% enterprise only with the names and brands that we've all grown up and loved. It's also small businesses being hacked as well. Would you agree with that, or have you seen something different?
Oh, I think they're kidding themselves if they think they're not, a target of these attacks. I mean, even us, like, we're scattered. We don't have a main office, and every week I get a phishing attack from you or from ex-employees asking for the latest financial report and, stuff like that. So it's out there happening to the small guys, even the local retail shops down the street from me on a daily basis, and they don't know what to look for. You see it, even on local news, you see it. People are getting scammed every day, and unfortunately, some still fall for that Nigerian prince scam that was around in the 90s, right? So it's there, and if you're not thinking about that as a small business owner, you better start thinking about it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I completely agree with you, Ken. I think attackers, if I was to put my attacker's hat on, white hacker, not
There you go,
the
white
unethical
hacker.
ones.
Ethical.
But what would be, I suppose, for them, this is a business as well. So how are they choosing the targets that they're going after? If I'm a hacktivist group, or if I'm an APT, or if I'm just a standard guy looking to deploy ransomware in a customer's environment, I need to choose wisely in terms of what is going to be the easiest way for me to get into an organization. And enterprise grade organizations, they tend to have a bit more, obviously, investments, a bit more processes and defenses in place. The SMBs is where those misconfigurations are small items that we don't really pay attention to and are not configured promptly, that the attacker is going to get in. So it's the easiest way for an attacker's route, possibly. And I know I'm conscious I'm generalizing here, but it's probably the I must get the stats on this, but the SMBs is where they can take the highest attack surface, I think, and attackers are going to go after what's the easiest and what can I get bigger rewards, or yeah, or combined rewards. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit to talk about our service providers, who are many in our audience. And what do you think the biggest mistakes are that you see MSPs or other service providers or agencies and consultancies? What are the biggest mistakes they make when adding a cybersecurity offering, and whether it's commercially or operationally, and what would you do instead?
Okay, yeah. So
I'll
biggest
give you an example,
mistake.
Elena, and let me ask one. I'm gonna add something that might help frame this a little better. Some MSPs, they decide to build their own tech stack and try to offer their own solutions, right? Or it's a
Mm,
hodgepodge hybrid. It's some of a pre-made product, and some of it's their own, or some of it will be based on an MDM or RMM software that they have, and then they layer, so security on it. They may sell firewalls and routers and so forth. But, you know, is that the right thing to do when the average MSP, and I'm going to use statistics from North America, but I suspect they're similar in Europe as well, which would be that the average MSP does less than 3 million in top line revenue, typically has less than 10 employees. So, I have a saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? And even if it's worth the squeeze, what kind of juice are you getting?
yeah,
So, so can you speak to that? Like, what do you
yeah,
see MSPs maybe doing incorrectly?
yeah. And I think no, totally agree with you, Dave. I think MSPs want to please the customer and make sure that they are doing a good job. And obviously, their reputation is on the line because their value is trust at scale. So if they have 100 different customers, they're going to, and if one of them gets breached, ultimately the MSP is their reputation and their brand is probably going to be tainted. So it's making sure um, that if you are looking to build a new pillar or build a new service line in your foundation, that you have the right team and the right processes in place in order to be able to deliver the same quality service, if not better than what you're currently doing. And I think this is where, let's say, managed service providers, they might have, I'm going to use offensive security as an example because that's what I relate to every day. But I think it's, if an MSP would be looking to build a offensive security team in-house, it's making sure that they devote the same amount of time and effort as they would do to their support, their IT support team as well. So whatever they do on a daily basis. And MSPs may not often have the resources and the capacity to build teams as effective as, let's say, already established brand in the offensive security space might be. And they're looking for quick fixes and they're looking to build a team very quickly or possibly train some people, some of their team up to best support their existing customer base. And it might not be to the same standard that, let's say, a traditional offensive security organization might do. So I think it's trying to meet customer requirements, but without having the team or the resources readily available to do it, and then being reactive to what the customer needs and not doing the due diligence or dedicating this enough time to spin up a service properly, and then possibly not looking out there well enough to see what's out there on the market. Is there something else we can white label that we could possibly position internally? And we let the experts do the job, and we bring another party in rather than let's do it all ourselves. And as you say, Dave, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is that the right
Exactly.
term?
That's the right term.
Um,
What I'm hearing you describe is really a mindset shift, right? The managed service provider, especially as technology keeps adapting, evolving in a in a more rapid manner. They may have to shift how they think about their vendor partners, right? They can't look at it as a product. They almost have to look at it as an addition to the team. Would you agree? Which is that what I heard you say? That basically a small MSP would have to invest a fair amount of capital to hire the skilled expertise and the technology and develop that tech stack, the security tech stack correctly. It might be better to find the right partner that has the right team and the right solutions for that particular case. Is that kind of what you were saying? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I heard. I want to kind of recap that because I think it's important for our MSPs.
I completely agree. Yeah, it's exactly that. And I think if the goal is to protect the customer's environment, which I'd imagine it is, and making sure that you deliver what you've said you would deliver, I think it's in your and the client's best interest to make sure that you dedicate the right amount of time to the right team, and that will ultimately result in the right outcomes as well.
Okay. So then let me pose this to you. If you could sit down right now today with a business leader, I'll even narrow it, an MSP, the owner of an MSP who's feeling a bit overwhelmed about where cybersecurity is going, what would you tell them and where should they start?
Yeah. So I suppose it's probably coming back to what I might have mentioned at the start, which is if an MSP is taking over the organization's IT department or IT infrastructure, it's making sure that they cover that, but also make sure that they get the end clients buy-in from an operational resilience. And when MSP is working with an end client, it's making sure that the client understands that the MSP isn't in this bucket over here, but they're overseeing possibly a lot more and keeping the customer alive and resilient across on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's bringing it back to the basics, which is the MSP doing its, if they said that they'll do these 10 services for the customer, are they patching it? Are they patching their assets effectively? Are they perhaps lacking in certain areas that they aren't providing a full end-to-end service? In which case, do they need to look elsewhere to be able to provide that end-to-end service to the end customer? And it's really been open to what are we missing? What are the gaps that we don't currently provide, and what can we do to fill those gaps in, to be able to keep building on that customer trust. And
is that something that WhatsExposed, and again, I never turn these into a commercial, but I do want to help our audience. Is that something that WhatsExposed does? Does it sit down with a service provider or a consultancy and say, let's look at your portfolio and augment or provide a solution that would work with their existing infrastructure, products and services offerings so that it becomes more well-rounded? I think the word I would use is proactive, not reactionary, but proactive. Is that something that your team does?
100%. Yep. So I'll use an example that happened yesterday actually. And it doesn't, I suppose, when we speak about MSPs or CSPs, we work with any sort of service provider. One of them yesterday was a Microsoft software development organization. And all they do is software development for clients in the Microsoft environment.
Okay.
We can align our services, our bespoke security testing solutions, to make sure that whatever software that Microsoft provider is, or that whatever software that organization is delivering or developing for the end client, that it's not only built, but it's also secured and tested from an attacker's perspective before go live. So it's really understanding what they're doing with the various Power Apps in the Microsoft space, and understanding on a project by project basis, how are they shaping that product and where can we come in at various different phases as part of that life cycle to support from an offensive security capability, so that the partner they can either position this as a full product under their umbrella, or they can say, look, we're developing the product here, but WhatsExposed, here's a third party. We didn't give them any information. Here's the independence view that they can bring to say that we've done our job correctly. So I think it's also there's obviously a risk there to say that WhatsExposed is going to come in to potentially find critical risks that in the software that they might have built. But someone is going to come and test that software at some point. So it's the benefit for the partner is that they're already in control of WhatsExposed they're in. We work with them. Perhaps it's given that MSP a 5-minute head start to say we've got resources already working on a fix, rather than they're caught off guard. So that's a question we often get from software developers, particularly development firms, where they say that we don't want you to correct our own homework, and we say that, well, someone else will. So you might want to be in control of the message, because we'll have to disclose it to the customer.
Well, as tech continues to evolve, Elena, what's on the horizon for cybersec in general? You know, AI, of course, was discussed, but other things that might be on the horizon. And then what's on the horizon for WhatsExposed? Like, what's exciting you about what you see in the next 12, 24, 36 months for WhatsExposed as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the cybersec world, I think probably up until 2024, 2025, ransomware was the big threat out there, and everyone was worried about ransomware. And now we're seeing a shift towards third-party risk and third-party supplier risk. How am I as an organization protected from my MSP that if they're breached, that I'm not affected? So we'll definitely see it, and we often, I suppose, in the most recent data breaches or most recent attacks, whether it's enterprise grade or smaller organizations, the most from an enterprise grade was seen Jaguar just in late 2025 in the UK. Complete stall of operations, lost billions of euro or pounds, and that was due to a third-party supplier attack. So I think we'll start seeing a shift where people are worried about third parties, and understanding. I suppose that's probably one thing to mention as well from an MSP perspective, is realizing that the MSP is also the attack surface for their customer. So how does the MSP make sure that they're protected and they look inside their organization first, and they don't invoke or they don't cause a loophole in the customer's environment through a VPN or a misconfigured access that they might have forgotten about. So I think it's third-party risk, I think, is where I'm kind of seeing it going. And obviously the use of AI, that goes without saying. And then from WhatsExposed, where are we seeing the trajectory go? If I was to look at WhatsExposed 3 years ago at inception, we had a very different value proposition model of whatever way we were going to position this to market. It has evolved, I'd say, 5 times even in the last 18 months, purely because I think we're listening. We're trying to listen to what our partners, what our end customers are telling us in terms of what do they need, and what are they worried about. And I think that has ultimately shaped who we are today in terms of the value proposition that we work with our partners and end customers. And I suppose even in the last 6 months, we've looked at shifting our focus towards third-party suppliers and what offensive techniques could we do to prevent or to protect customers from third-party supplier risk. So I think that's always changing and evolving. Copilot, Gen AI, offensive security services will obviously be are a key topic at the moment, which weren't 6-8 months ago. So I think as the customers start to realize realize the threats that are out there or see it on a day-to-day basis, they tend to come to us and we take their feedback and try to align to whatever the customer needs or the partners.
Thank you. Final question, Elena. and I asked
Oh
this
God.
of all of our guests.
Oh no.
What is one thing in this ecosystem that we're not talking to or talking about that we perhaps should be?
Interesting. That's an interesting one now. Sorry, I'll have to take one moment to think about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Maybe it's something that is being talked about, but maybe not in the manner you think it should be, or maybe not as loudly or as a critical component that's sort of just waning, but maybe shouldn't be.
I have to really think about this one. I'm so sorry. I
That's
don't know.
okay. This one gets all of our guests. It's a great question. So no
Um,
worries.
How about, as an example, when it comes to cybersecurity, maybe there's a fallacy or there's something that it's not just a misunderstanding, which we did talk to a little bit, but maybe there's something that you believe is more of a myth. How about that? Is there, and maybe that myth should be addressed. Is there a myth? Something that you see that maybe isn't quite right?
yeah, okay, I think I get. So I think it probably touches on a few points that we discussed today. I'll choose one or two, particularly, let's say that small organizations, they think they're never going to be uh, hit by a cyber attack. And I'm safe. I'm a person. I'm a single. I'm a one-man organization, and I deliver X for my customers. Perfect example. I was at an event a few months back, and there was this chef who is purely built her business around her cooking skills and build a brand on Instagram and identity and all that kind of stuff. And she built up to I think 20 or 40,000 Instagram views or followers within a very short period of time. One day her credentials got breached and her entire life was gone from a work perspective, and she had to rebuild everything back as that 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 took a long time. So I suppose it's small organizations are also a target for attackers. Don't just think that if you're not a Marks and Spencer or you're not a Striker or Jaguar or whatever that you're not going to be hit. Attackers will find a way to knock down your door as well. But this is not a threat. This is just make sure you're pragmatic, and the approach that any organization is taking is prioritize what's important, not what's urgent. There you go.
To add to that, I always hear people say, well, I use Google for X, Y, and Z, or I use Microsoft for ABC, so I'm covered. Can you speak to that as well? Because I hear that all the time with small business owners that have maybe 20, 40, 50 employees, and they feel like they've picked the winner. I mean, I think, if we go back to when I was getting my start, you always heard the saying, no one got fired for choosing AT&T. And then in the early 2000s, I think Cisco sort of got that
Cisco, yeah.
mantra instead. And, every 5, 10 years, someone else gets to have that lead. I mean, on the consumer side, I'm sure Apple is considered the rock solid of, security and so forth. Can you speak to the fact that maybe that also should be talked about? That, hey, just because you picked a really large company that's got a valuation of several $1 trillion, globally, that alone may not be it. What do you want to say to that, Elena?
100%. And I think it comes to me, it comes down to the responsibilities that you have with that vendor or that cloud provider, and making sure that there is clear, it's black and white what your
Mhm.
responsibilities are from an organization's from within your organization than what the vendor is or the MSP. Because if you don't have those responsibilities defined effectively from the start, you'll think that Microsoft are looking after how your application is configured within Azure. And then it's not their responsibility. Then you come to find that it's not their responsibility whatsoever. It's actually how you've deployed it and how you use the platform to build your services. So responsibility is absolutely key, because when a cyber attack possibly happens, people are going to start pointing fingers at each other, and they're going to think that, well, you're responsible for that. And then it's at that point, when an attack possibly happens, you want to be prepared and be ready to act on what your business continuity plan is, rather than point fingers off to say, we thought you were responsible for this, go fix it, without having any rehearsal or anything like that done. So couldn't agree with you more, Dave.
Well, that's an interesting point, because anyone in the small business world isn't going to have someone who's a contract expert or a legal expert or whatever, and they're not going to read the T's and C's of a Google or a Microsoft or any of those organizations. They're just going to trust that what they signed up for is going to work and going to protect them, right? So that's a whole nother point to look at. You should know where your responsibilities are, even using the big guys out there. But I know that takes a lot of time and effort and all that stuff. So it's hard for a small business owner to put that effort into it, to understand it.
Perhaps for a different podcast, we could even do something where we talk about the ideas of cyber security insurance, different types of employee practices, liability insurance, et cetera, that might help even those small and medium businesses. I know a lot of enterprises have that type of insurance, but there might be some discussion there as well for that. Not on this podcast, but I think that's another topic, Ken, that you kind of just went down that we may want to talk about, and some of our audience may be interested. Elena, Ken and I really appreciate you joining us today. This was a great conversation and a lot of insight for our audience. We're going to be sharing your information with our audience on the podcast when we go to production. So no need to try to give them how to get in touch with you. We're going to take care of that for you. Ken, any final words before we let Elena go?
Oh, great episode. Thank you. Great conversation. And to everybody out there, thanks for joining us. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, please. And you can see what else we're up to at engagep2p.com. So until next time, keep building, keep leading, and always keep it at 100% uptime.